Hey guys, welcome back to the Lovin Dubai show. Today's guests are Harry, Amos and Nick Coates. Harry recently ran 630 kilometres across 7 Emirates in under 6 days. His coach Nick, an endurance athlete, played a vital role in guiding him through this remarkable challenge. In doing so, Harry set a world record while raising awareness for global diabetes, a noble feat no less. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Excited to have this chat.
Good to see you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Harry, we'll start with you. The last time you were on this show, you had set a record. You were in a rowboat for 39 days.
That's right, yeah.
And you've just broken a record for running across the 7 Emirates.
It was time to kind of put the ego on the chopping block again and see if it would survive. Actually, where we were on the boat, my brother and I in Paris were kind of already scheming our next plans, and Paris, as you might know, ran in 7 continents, 7 days, 7 marathons the same week as I was running across the 7 Emirates, almost like we designed it, but no, it was a complete coincidence. And my brother, who's also on the rowing boat, is going to run across Sweden as well. So we all had our little challenges, and we were kind of in the execution phases of those. But my plan was to do something much closer to home, because the rowing thing, as brilliant as it was, took us to the other side of the planet, and it was time to kind of do something on our doorstep. We love the UAE, it is our home, and it was just a great way of seeing the whole country.
And let's be clear, so did you go in planning to break the world record? What was the previous record?
It was 5 days, 23 hours, essentially, set by a chap called Everin. And he himself had beaten the previous record set by Sean Burgess 2 years before. To answer your question, I knew it was it was on the horizon. It was something I knew was there. Genuinely, the day before, I was more concerned about finishing it, let alone getting the record. And there's always a lot of self-doubt in these things, and I tried in the build-up not to kind of overemphasize the fact that I was going for the world record, because you've got to manage people's expectations, right? But then as the plan was executed, and with Nick and the support crew's sort of help, we were able to kind of get pretty close to it, and it wasn't until we didn't know we had it until probably the last few hours of the last day. So it was definitely never in the bag, and I never thought it was on the cards, or certainly going to be easy.
Wow. Well, we'll certainly touch more on that later on. But Nick, as his coach through this entire process, what are your thoughts when someone comes to you with this kind of out of the box challenge and saying, I not just want to do it, but I want to smash it?
First of all, as soon as Harry came to me with this opportunity to support him through this, I jumped at it. I was all in from the beginning, because I'm excited and fascinated by endurance sports and what it takes. Harry is an inspiration to me, what he's done in the past with the rows and other things that he's taken on. But when he's taking on this challenge here, from the beginning, I had no doubt that he was going to complete this, if not break the record as well. So I was all in, and when I heard the plan, it really excited me. So yeah.
And you've been involved in endurance before. What kind of endurance missions have you got your experience from?
I mean, I've done during lockdown when I lived in Singapore, cycled 120 kilometers around the island, and then ran 120 kilometers. So a bit of a biathlon there.
As you do.
By no means trained to that sort of distance, but much like Harry, just wanted to take on the challenge and see what it felt like, pushing yourself to that limit and learning from the experience through endurance. And that sort of started my interest in that, and then done a number of ultra marathons, mountain marathons, this sort of stuff. And I'm training towards doing the Peru multi-stage 230-kilometer jungle ultra with Beyond the Ultimate in June this year.
Which, by the way, sounds much harder.
So it's exciting, and with my coaching as well, I'm fascinated by the lessons you can learn from endurance sports. And how you can apply those to your life as well.
Interesting. Let's talk a little bit about that. So when you're going into something of this magnitude, in your opinion, what is more challenging? Is it the physical aspect or the mental aspect?
So I think one way I look at these things is that the physical aspect has to be a given. You have to prepare your body. And then once you've prepared your body, you almost park that, it's done, right? So then you're focusing completely on the mental aspect. If you went into this thing and your body wasn't ready, then it's very unlikely that your mental is going to get you through it. So you have to get that done. So there was a build-up of at least a year of high volume running training, a huge amount of gym work, so that kind of on day one, there was that was all done, all I could have done. So then we were focused on the mental aspect, and one of the things that Nick's very good at reminding me throughout was that if you look at something as a whole, if you look at 630 kilometers, it's pretty daunting for even the most seasoned runner, and I'm not a seasoned athlete by any means.
I mean, I can't imagine
Yeah.
that bad.
Yeah, but there are people that are definitely a lot better than me.
Right.
But what we do is we break it down into these bite-sized chunks, so that everything is done in phases, so that you're not focusing on too much on the 6:30, or focusing on the next 2 or 3 hours at a time. So that's one way of it. And the other element of the mental aspect is to fuel the body, is to make sure your body is in the best place it can be. So if you are well fed and you've had enough sleep, and in my case you've got enough electrolytes and stuff going into your body, your mind is going to be in its best possible state. So feeding, and thanks to Spinnies who were providing all the food, and Nick, who was there as kind of a third eye, because sometimes when you're exhausted sometimes you can't read yourself, and sometimes you need someone else to go, this is what you need, and you go, yeah, okay, cool, and then you sort of take what you're given. So that's another massive element. And then the other, there are little tricks of the trade which you can employ to get you through the mental strain of it. And what I like to do is you use a distraction technique whereby I envisage kind of the overall goal, and I kind of focus on that for a bit, and then I get that becomes daunting for a bit, so I bring it down to the next leg. So all I've got to do is get the next leg, and I envisage finishing that leg, and I get bored or tired of that, and then I switch to counting lampposts. So you always have a kind of long, medium, and short-term thing, and you kind of switch between the three. And if you do, you can cycle through that for a very long time, and amazingly the hours start kind of going by. And then just being focused on what you're trying to achieve. Not too many external distractions is a big thing. Nick talks about singularity of purpose. So there's a little bit of cutting out the noise of life, and that's part of the joy of doing these endurance things, is that to do them properly, you have to cut off work. You even have to cut off momentarily your family and all that kind of stuff, so you can focus on doing that one thing. And so there's a kind of tranquility and peace that comes with that.
There's so much there, and I imagine, as you said, the mental part of it is the most challenging. So Nick, as a coach, how do you guide people through that? You always think about what are the tough talks that you've had to have along the way, and how do you know it's the right talk to have?
I mean, yeah, it's quite right. It's about timing as well, and understanding from me as the coach's perspective in that moment was trying to understand what he needed in that moment. Did he need the pep talk? Did he need the fueling? Did he need the rest? And just as Harry describes it, just being like that Overwatch, that third eye, just looking for blind spots that maybe he's not thinking about. Because right there, he's thinking about my quads blowing up, my calves blowing up, whatever that is, trying to get into that aid station and just sit down. I'm making sure that everything is laid out there for him. When you talk about the journey, the goal was clear, go from point A to point B in a set period of time. But it's breaking it down into those phases to achieve that. And again, that's like any goal that people might be out there trying to set for themselves. Don't think about the end state. Let's think about the small little steps that you can take to get you towards there. And before you know it, when you start leaning into that, you start chipping away. One point there, really, I think was sort of the tipping point. There's many opportunities that Harry could have stepped away from this and just used an excuse. For example, we had a interaction with the police, which slowed our progress.
Some safety concerns about running
Some
on the side
safety
of the
concerns,
road,
obviously,
which
running on the side of the road.
All put to bed.
All put to bed.
Right.
The police were fantastic, by the way.
And they did a fantastic job, and they looked after us very well. And but yeah, as Harry's doing the nodding dog in the police station at 1 o'clock in the morning, thinking about starting the run again at 4 o'clock in the morning, there was an opportunity for him at that stage to say, do you know what? I've got enough of an excuse here not to go and punish myself with another 105 or so kilometers of running the next day. But he never even crossed into that boundary of thinking, giving himself that excuse to get out. But what that did mean was the next day you're absolutely, tired, suffering on the lay-by, so I had to go and replan him in that position. The following day we had it was going to go into the biggest day. So the night before, I wanted to understand what his parameters were for success for that next day. And he volunteered the information that my parameters for success is going to be 100 kilometers by 9:30 p.m. the following day.
Bear in mind, we had 130 to do.
130 to do, exactly. So it's like, okay, cool, go to bed, wake up the next morning, and went through the day, like we'd been doing for 5 days previously. And when you got really to that point of like, I've got 70 kilometers or so to go.
We were about 65 in.
Yeah.
And one thing you probably don't remember saying, I remember saying to you, God, Nick, it's still a really long way.
Yeah.
And Nick went, it's always been a long way.
It's always been a long way.
And it was a particularly low moment for me. And then, you carry on.
Then with that, so I jumped in there and said, okay, so what was your gauge for success for today? It was 100 kilometers by 9:30. And then we looked at the watch, looked at the distance, looked at what was left. Suddenly it was like, well, that's achievable. And he actually came in with 1 hour to spare to then attack the final 30 kilometers of that day, which will get him in for the record.
And then we didn't even really, we came in at...
Goosebumps, guys. That's amazing.
Yeah, we got in at like 8:30, and we thought we'd come in at 9:30. We didn't even talk about the last 30k. Yeah. We just came in. I went and sat and I had my trusty scamp, which is my neighbour's caravan where I was sleeping in, sponsored by Roseleaf Cafe, and went in there, and I was supposed to have kind of 20 minutes like kip essentially. Obviously, it's very hard to sleep when your body's kind of twitching all the time. And I just lay there for 20 minutes, put my head torch on, put my jumper on because it was getting chilly, and then came outside. Nick made sure I was actually awake, which was easy because I was wide awake, and then came out and we were just like, right, so we're doing the last 30k then. It wasn't even discussed, but it was just a really good example of if you're just breaking it down into the, and I genuinely thought there was no way I could do another 70k in the day, but I could do another 40, and it ended up that I did that 40 an hour under what I thought I was going to do it in, and then you're just last bit, and no one's going to give up in the last 30k of a 630k run. Of
course, humans are so awesome, and you make it sound like it sounds like it's achievable nearly, but I have no doubt that every step of the way was challenging. And I just wonder, you mentioned an opportunity to bow out. Was there any kind of mentally, personally challenging moments that you just could not, that was like the next step is going to be tricky on me? Was there any kind of, I don't know, foot sores along the way? How were your feet at the end?
So feet were fine, but the swelling started after about day 3, so about 300k in, the swelling comes from the feet upwards. So they start getting, your club feet start getting heavier and heavier, and quite painful because there's a lot of blood in them. So every time we stopped, it was Nick would have the chair up against the side of the vehicle so that my legs could go straight away onto the vehicle to just get as much blood out as possible to reduce the pain there.
Wow.
And then the swelling over the subsequent 3 days went further up and up and up the legs until it kind of finished. It got right up to my hips. So it was that feeling of just like having giant elephant feet, kind of, and then so the relief, even for like 10 seconds, to have my feet up on a stop was really, really important. I literally run just so I could get my feet up on the edge. But really very lucky. Like I had a very swollen Achilles, again an expected injury, which meant I lost mobility there, but nothing acute. I think anyone would have the same issues Achilles-wise. So no, really I came off quite unscathed in that regard.
There was never this is too much.
Yeah, do you know what the closest? So a few moments. So but the main real watershed moment was after our sleepless nights in Abu Dhabi because of the safety issue with the police. We'd done 100k on day 3. We'd had this sleepless night, and we had 100k to do on day 4. But of course we hadn't slept. So day 3 and day 4 were like the same day basically, and we were mid-afternoon on day 4, and I had just started. I'd run every step up until kind of basically day 4. And on day 4, I was doing this kind of speed march. So I'd run a kilometre, walk 500 metres, run a kilometre, walk 100 metres. And I was on a running section in the afternoon, and I was very, very sleepy, like as in falling asleep, not just tired. And I came to as a truck went right past me, full, horn beeping, and I had run into. Luckily, it's after Abu Dhabi where there aren't many vehicles at all, but I'd literally run into the road. Like, crap, so I got back into the lay-by. We're about 70k, and I spoke to Nick at the next CP that we'd organised. I said, Nick, I'm kind of dangerous right now, and I'm not. And so we what's the plan? And we said, right, we're going to cut today short. So we're not going to do 100k today. I think we did 75, which is disappointing for me, but vital, because if I were to continue till 11 p.m., then I wouldn't get any sleep, and then day 5 would be a write-off, and so on and so forth. So that rest on night 4 meant that day 5, was very intimidating, because I knew I had a big day ahead. I'd had kind of 5 hours sleep. And so that tactical decision we made meant that over the last 2 days, we then had 25 kilometres to catch up, which we etched off, 1 half-hour window at a time, which then put us back into the runnings again. But I'd rather not have had that kind of very low moment on day 4, but you've got to deal with the hand you've been dealt, and it's not an adventure unless something goes wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it was gaining those small advantages where we could as well, rather than like 7.5 rather than 7. It's like that extra 500 meters chip away. But again, it was one of the key lessons there, I think, was understanding when was time to just pull back a little bit to set yourself up for the next day. That was the most important thing, to make sure that the next day was going to be a success.
Right.
Whatever's happened has happened at that stage. Now it's time to reset, realign, work out how we're going to make the next day as successful as possible. And I think you could take that forwards in your day-to-day. Sometimes we can push until the wheels come off. But again, take that tactical pause, take that time just to rest and just reassess things a little bit.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Have a night's sleep.
Have a night's sleep.
Earlier you mentioned it was a year in training and that work and family went on the back seat. And I wonder if this is the same for many people taking on endurance challenges. And how does that actually play out in real life? Like, how do you really balance it? Like, and would you jump into something soon after? And is this what people do for endurance challenges? Like, everything else takes a back foot?
No, I mean, there has to be a balance. And by the way, when I say the family took a back seat, not during training. During training, obviously, I'm afraid you have to kind of burn the candle at both ends. It just meant that you have to get up incredibly early in the morning, because you've got to get volume in. You've got to get kind of 100k a week in at least. So you've got to get up really, really early in the morning before your children wake up. And then you go running after they've gone to bed, which means that you're then fighting that kind of sleep training balance, which you can do over time. For the event itself, yes, there has to be a separation so that you can focus. But I wouldn't take on I don't take on any of these events lightly, because there is an impact on family work as well. And certainly for the foreseeable, I'm going to focus on that side of my life going forward. I've done 2 back-to-back kind of big ones, so I'm going to have a little air gap before the next one. But yeah, it is tough. But there are 24 hours in a day. There are 24 hours in a day, and not many people realise that. And it's easier said than done. It's easier to say, well, you just get up earlier and run later. Life takes over. Days don't go how you planned. Things go wrong, right? Getting into habitual. Getting into good habits is easier said than done. One of the things I use, and the technique I use, is I use the breadcrumb method. So so when I go to bed at night and I know I've got an early morning run, I don't just set my alarm. I lay my stuff out the night before. I have my contact lenses on the sink ready. I put the tea bag in the cup downstairs in the kitchen, so that when I wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, I'm not going for a run. I'm just going downstairs to put the kettle on. I go downstairs, put the kettle on, and then I pour myself a cup of tea and I put my contact lenses in, and then I sit, before long you're sat on the sofa drinking a cup of tea in your running gear. You haven't really got many options left.
I love these habits
but
so
to go
much.
for a run, right? So sometimes you just got to break things down into really easy wins. And I'm not advocating everybody go for a run at 5 o'clock in the morning, but you can do that for later on in the morning as well. So motivation isn't some magical gift from God. There are certain tricks of the trade which you can employ to help you do these things. And I've got enough experience from my time in the military and help from people like Nick to know that there are little systems that you can build to help you kind of do things.
Can we talk on those systems, maybe Nick, to you, like one more trick of the trade, because people watching today, I know myself, I couldn't even imagine doing this type of feat, but maybe it's possible. And I just wonder, is there any other trick or habit that you would encourage people who want to take their first step into fitness?
I mean, so obviously this is a massive undertaking, and by no means everyone is going to do this or want to do this or even do that, but what is important is looking after our health and wellness, right? But one of the biggest barriers I see with people that approach me or clients that I've started to work with or continue to work with is just starting. That is the first step. And one of the values of my coaching, and I know is a strong value for Harry as well, is courage. Having that physical courage or that moral courage to actually take on something that might be a little bit challenging. But once you chip it away at it and you do that one challenging thing once, it's like the breadcrumb method. You then move on to the next thing, move on to the next thing. So if it's your first 1 kilometer fast walk, or the next day, then you do another 2 kilometers. But it's just starting, which is the most important thing. Some people are overwhelmed by information. Some people are intimidated by the challenge, might be intimidated by the gym environment. But it's just starting. And that's the one message I can tell anyone. The best time is now. You know, the second best time was yesterday. So, just get out there and do whatever it is that helps you maintain that momentum.
I hear you. Go buy the gym gear. I absolutely will.
Yeah.
You did the challenge to raise awareness for diabetes. You raised 16,000 dirham, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, so we're about 20,000 dirham now.
Yeah.
You know, none of this would have been possible without the partnership with M42, which is the biggest medical group here in the UAE. They provided my physio, who came on the road with us, and a medic as well.
Wow.
So like we were a proper team that Nick was running, and we both share this mission to raise awareness for those living with diabetes. It's so relevant to exercise because almost 70% of all diabetes cases would not exist if people exercise regularly. So it's such an easy one. It's not easy, but it's such a fixable thing, right? So just putting the message out there of what can be done, what's possible. If one person decided to go for a run because they watched me trundling down the side of Sheikh Zayed Road, then I see it as a success. And it's it's a real issue. 1 in 5 people in the UAE are suffering with diabetes. So we continue to raise awareness and funds, so it aligns well with what we were trying to achieve. So.
A noble cause. You're watching, if you're just tuning into the show, the man who broke the record for 7 Emirates in less than 6 days, and the coach Nick who helped him do it. If people have questions, which I'm sure they do, how can they find you if they want to donate, if they want to get in touch with questions about endurance, how can they do so? Sure.
So the best thing is go via Instagram. I don't know if you can share my link, but it's Amos 28. And I'll share links. I'm doing direct messaging to share links to donate to the International Diabetes Federation, and also just following on from. So I haven't got the Guinness World Record yet, actually. So you've got to submit a lot of paperwork. So
right.
all of that's in. So we'll see if I have the official record. Hopefully,
but we know
soon. Yeah.
Do we know?
Well, if I've got the evidence in and everyone's happy, then we're good. So
okay, well, fingers crossed.
Not counting my chickens yet,
Right.
Yes, I'm on Instagram, nickcoates.performance. And if anyone is ever interested in how to begin their fitness journey or take on bigger challenges, then I'm very happy to field questions, get on a call, answer DMs, whatever. I'm passionate about this. I love working with all manner of people in this sphere. So reach out if you're interested.
Are you open to people breaking Harry's record? If
sure,
I say I want to,
we know all the trade secrets now.
Awesome, guys! Thank you so much for the great chat, and congratulations!
Thank you very much.
What a great
Thanks so much for having me.
That brings us to the end of the Lovin Dubai show. We're back with you every single weekday morning, same time, same place. I'm actually away for the next 2 weeks, so I'll see you in 2 weeks. But Mas and the team will be here bringing you the top stories of Dubai. Have a beautiful day. Bye bye.